Everyone, please welcome David LaMagna, who is our guest speaker for today. David is an ecology and science teacher with over 20 years of experience at the Northport High School. He has been a long-time birder, but really has an interest in all life forms, and you'll kind of see how that has trickled down through his professional work. At Northport, he developed a new course for his students, one being the Long Island Long Island Native Ecology and Plant Science. And the purpose of this course is to help students learn and practice restoration ecology from their very own school campus. Additionally, he helps to score the AP Environmental Science exam and serves as a moderator of the Long Island Native Plant Gardening Group on Facebook. And if that wasn't enough, he also created BLING, which is an acronym that stands for Biodiversity of Long Island Native Gardens. And it is a citizen science project on iNaturalist. He himself has recorded thousands of observations on iNaturalist, which is a feat. So, welcome, David. We're very happy to have you. I am going to just briefly thank our sponsors, of course, for making everything that we do possible, and then I will hand it over to David.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I've been there for at Northport for 20 years. I've always been like a nature person, but my background is actually, or my like training is in chemistry. And this is all kind of just, if I can learn this stuff, anyone can. I know the word like expert was used, but I mean, we're all experts in our own ways. And like, so I'm still like learning just like everyone else here. Um, I'm also a New York State Master Naturalist volunteer, which is a great program based out of the Arnott Forest and as part of Cornell outside of Ithaca. And there's plenty of other people around the island. So if you ever see someone uh, with the Master Naturalist uh, label hosting an event or something like that, you should definitely check it out. And then, yeah, I use iNaturalist like crazy, and that's my username there. I think like the word swag was a big thing like a couple of years ago with students. So my students, that's my students calling me LaMag swag, and it just stuck. So I don't know. Um, but yeah, ReWild asked me to put together a presentation on winter wildlife support. Um, so here it is. All the pictures here are my own, unless they're otherwise labeled. Um, but I was saying before we got started here that I very rarely take like landscape or pictures or anything like that in like the dead of winter. So it was actually kind of hard to piece things together. But I went back in time and I tried including some dates so you could actually see like this picture was taken in January or things like that. Um, yeah, so overall, what's the goal of the workshop? Um, and it's to support native wildlife of Long Island, specifically in the wintertime. And then I was like, I was trying to think about like a good starting point here. And I was thinking like, wow, what a huge task that is. And I think for anyone that's new or has been interested in native plant gardening for a long time. It's like overwhelming. You just want to get everything. You're like, I need this plant, this plant does this. And you need to take a step back and realize Long Island is home to, it's a really special place where like a confluence between southern biomes and New England biomes, and we have coastal habitat. And because of that, we have so many insect species, uncountable numbers. We're still discovering things. There are things that are undescribed by modern science still um, that could be in our own backyards. On top of that, we have hundreds of birds, fish, crustaceans, a handful of reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and anything else I didn't cover. And I think it's important to take a step back and say like no one property can do it all. You could do your part, okay? Um, and to just to maybe add a couple of things to your garden or your routine or whatever it might be. It's a heavy it would be a heavy lift to support everything. Um, And Long Island is a home to a diverse array of habitats. I don't know where everyone on this talk is from. I'm in the center of the island. I'm not near a coastline. Other people might be. Fisher's Island is part of New York and Suffolk County. Um, so my first suggestion, again, thinking about a message that would have a little something for everyone, is to start with like a walk, right? What places are around your house? We have such diverse ecosystems. Are you closer to the Pine Barrens? Are you near some of our amazing coastal systems? Are you part of like more the North Shore inland rich hardwood forests? Are there? I wrote here. Does your property have a water feature? Or does it flood in a certain way? Meaning, when it rains or when there's heavy storms, is the land trying to go back to what it used to be, and what habitat near you is very similar to that? And most importantly, visit those places in the winter time. What do they look like? And what can you then emulate on your own property? Um, so everyone's place would be different. I also just strongly recommend visiting all of Long Island during the winter time. Again, such a diverse and beautiful landscape. Going hiking in the wintertime, the beach in the wintertime. Oh, like that's a secret. I don't even know if I want that posted on YouTube because then there's going to be other people there. Um, it's the desolation is part of the beauty, um, and and the magic of like the winter season. So strongly encourage that. So again, go out there. What does native habitats look like? The ones around you, what are the types of plants there? What do you notice that you can, in a sense, bring a part of that home with you? Okay. There's a couple other things here, and I feel like I'm not going to gain too many friends with this list, but don't like kill me on this. Um, it's ReWild Long Island. We want to rewild things, restore things, put those threads back together to build the fabric of biodiversity. We're not here to be like do-gooders and just help. I want to make sure that what you do has the correct intent, and that we make sure we make informed decisions. Um, so part of that includes like focusing on improving landscapes, uh, which with our native plants, right? So that's an easy one. Um, the other thing is like just to be careful with overzealous supplemental feeding of wild creatures, right? These creatures have evolved to survive in the wintertime. We want to bring that ability back to them and not simulate it in such a way where they become dependent on us. So some things to think about would be like the bird seed mixes. A lot of them contain non-native species like millet and stuff like that. Now there are companies that sell um, native bird seeds, native seeds specifically for birds, and that's a really cool idea. And that like kind of blew my mind when I first saw that. Right? So if you notice, and when they're feeding, they're knocking the other stuff out of the way, and they're just focusing on the like sunflower seeds, right? Helianthus, the genus, is native to North America. That's what the birds know. They'll eat the other stuff out of desperation. So it's not. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a bird feeder. But it's just to think about it, or if you can, spend the extra money for a higher quality mix. Also, making sure you're cleaning the feeders because as birds come there, they can be centers for disease transfer. Um, and the seeds themselves, as they spill all over the place, can attract unwanted wildlife like mice and rats and stuff, which I have at the bottom there. Okay. Also, we want to prevent putting out canned food and stuff for maybe larger mammals. I know people like to feed like possums and raccoons. We don't want to habitualize these creatures to the human presence. For one, it's going to increase negative interactions. They might be start to cross streets more frequently to get to that food source, which puts them at a danger for increased road mortality, increasing occurrence with our pets. Um, uh, which can transmit disease. Like the foxes on Long Island really suffered from canine distemper over the past couple of years and are just starting to rebound from that in mange. Um, and other species can start to become, some native species can turn into pests when they start looking at houses as homes, like flying squirrels or eastern gray squirrels. So everything in moderation. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know that's not like a very popular message, but it is an important one. We want to restore ecosystems, not just help. Okay. So just something to keep in mind. That being said, later on I will talk about like, being crafty and making bird feeders. So just something to keep in mind there. Okay. A message that comes up a lot that we hear all the time, especially now, is about leaves, what to do with the leaves, the leaves, the leaves, the leaves, leaves. Yes, they serve a purpose, right? And here's some pictures of things. Yeah, and I didn't really go too hard on leaf stuff because I feel like that this information is out there a lot. It serves as protection and cover for species, including year-round camouflage. I think we always think about it as something that needs to be there from fall to spring, but throughout the year, that downed foliage acts as camouflage for like this moth right here. In case you need to notice that there was a moth there, this is one, right? And I think this picture was taken in the summertime. So their purpose is year-round, not just during this off season. Okay. In doing so, on being on the ground, they insulate the ground, which is important for like ground nesting bees. Okay. In case we don't know, the majority of bees either live in stems, which will come up, uh, or in the ground. The idea of a beehive is specific to honeybees from Eurasia and maybe some other bee species that we don't have here. Um, so insulating the ground for as they overwinter, either as queens or as pupa, is important, right? Cycling of nutrients, putting carbon back into soils. Uh, the metric I heard once is that it takes 500 years of leaf layer to make an inch of topsoil. That soil itself is a non-renewable resource. We think it's everywhere, but it's not. It's a limiting factor in a number of ecosystems, and it takes longer than a human lifetime to regenerate naturally. And the leaves can be used to suppress unwanted plant growth. A nice leaf layer can maybe suppress problematic garlic mustard or other invasives that you might be struggling with in your yard. Um, so just around here, right? So here we see in December a false milkweed bug. In January, I came across this caterpillar. It's a species of litter moth. I don't know which one in particular, but I thought that was so cool. I was like amazed when I found that in January, and it overwinters and feeds on dead leaf matter. I was shocked by that. There's no organism in here. I just needed a picture but right here we have a spring peeper hiding out. This was late fall around this time, a couple of years ago. So just keeping in mind that there's all sorts of critters on Long Island here. Okay. Um, you know, what to do with them. Okay. This is kind of in order of priority, right? Um, the message typically would be, leave them exactly where they are. This is this is one of those things where you want to take those walks And what does nature do with those leaves? There are places where the leaves move in such a way where there is bare ground. Um, Maybe you have, if it's a coastal ecosystem, do you have the right types of trees? Are you forcing uh, a leaf problem when there shouldn't be one in that habitat? This is a very broad brush, and this is why knowing where you live or what the systems around you are supposed to be, right, is important. Do the leaves accumulate in a certain area? Can you account for that, right? Can you put, they all seem to blow against it and they build up along this fence line. Can you put a garden there, right? So that way they're just kind of moved into that location for you, okay? Um, Moving them to one area, creating a brush pile. And I don't know if everyone has that luxury with space. Again, thinking about smaller properties and larger properties, um, that might be difficult. Using them as cover on garden beds or moving them into existing beds is a good idea. And then we get into the touchier subjects. Um, maybe you've put some leaves in your bed, um, and you still have some left over. Um, Mulching and shredding them. You could do it. There are things living in there, and they will succumb most likely to that process. Um, is that better? I put that higher on the list and say bagging them for complete removal, right? So the bottom bullet there is the one you want to try to avoid as much as possible. Paper over plastic, of course, in this situation. And I think it's important to think about where the end use of those is. Inquire with your town and municipality what happens to those specific leaf pickup days. I know the town of Islip runs a compost facility. I take my students there every year. They have great machinery now that can remove plastic bags. Um, and it might not be the best solution, but it's certainly better than them rotting in a landfill. And that soil that compost will go back onto a yard, or it can be used any number of ways. Um, so it'd be interesting, or to really start a ground movement about getting towns to get more responsible collection practices in place. Um, Now, that being said, right, given all of that, you still have to be realistic, right? Each year might be different. And everyone's yard is different, right? They can be an issue, right? They are hazardous for walkways. Um, Letting them build up near structures could be a fire hazard. Okay. Um, is it worth conflicts with neighbors or a spouse or something like that, right? Everything in moderation here. Um, Clogging storm drains, that's a picture of my drain, like right now. I have to clean those up. I have to move those, leave someplace else. If I don't in time, if I'm not paying attention, constant, right? This isn't okay, I put them in the garden bed and I'm done. You need to continuously think about the long-term effects. When it rains, is it causing the water to shed off of it in a certain way? Um, is it smothering the wrong plants? If I am trying to have or I used to have Housatonia. I forget the English name for it, but like violets and stuff in one area, the leaves there smother the plants. Or some spring ephemerals, right? When you go out for that walk in the wintertime, is the leaf layer this thick or is it this thick, right? Piling it up too much will prevent the growth of maybe some of those plants. And then there is allelopathy issues. A possible issue with Norway maple. If you're keeping the wrong leaves, as those leaves decay, they might be putting chemicals into the ground that inhibit growth. So allelopathy is like how black walnut prevents, as part of its evolutionary strategy, puts out jungalone, which is a chemical that prevents other plants from growing in its vicinity, so it doesn't have to compete for water and nutrients and stuff like that. Supposedly there might be an issue with Norway maple, right? So if your neighbor has a Norway maple and those leaves are falling on your property, and you're thinking it's great to put that on your native garden bed, it might actually be causing harm. Um, but everything in moderation. Uh, I looked closely at a number of websites about leaving the leaves and everything like that, and it always says avoid something like overzealous cleanups. Getting it down to zero is not the answer. And perhaps for you and your property, keeping 100% might not be the answer either. I think individual homeowners really need to think about that. What can they do to move towards 100? But I would not say you need to put that pressure on yourself to keep every leaf that falls on your yard. Okay. I know that's not a typical message. And something else I wanted to bring up is that, disturbance is a way of life in natural systems. This a photo is a large piece of managed property, which has a number of species and stuff like that. I'm not allowed to disclose where it is, but they do um, prescribed burns, right? In natural systems, in the pine barrens, it's a fire-dependent ecosystem. That material is not building up over millennia, right? It is getting removed semi-periodically through natural processes, not just decomposition, but also fire, which puts the nutrients back. So it does speed up the process. So again, where do you live? And different types of habitats have mechanisms to deal with uh, debris over time. Um, so to take the pressure off yourself a little bit, you don't need, again, to to worry so much about keeping 100%. Again, the more, the better, but different strokes for different folks here. Um, so good land stewardship requires active management. It's never just one and done. Okay. It's like the putting out the bird feeders. If you don't clean it periodically, you might end up doing more harm than good. Getting away from the leaf stuff, because I feel like you hear a lot of stuff about that. What else can you do in the yard? With the leaf, and this might help with where to put the leaves. Incorporating logs and sticks. Using maybe larger sticks, especially as a border. Okay, you can intertwine them and make them like a fence even. You could build a circle if you have a big piece of property with sticks, and then put the leaves in the middle there. Um, but where do the organisms go in the wintertime? They're underneath the leaf litter, and they're underneath logs, and they're in this and underneath the bark and underneath the sticks. So one of my favorite like winter pastimes when I'm looking for critters is to look under logs. And you find all sorts of stuff there. Peeling back some bark, I found these are a type of wasp that are predatory on caterpillars. I found another type of caterpillar that eats dead wood. Um, uh, some of our native bees overwinter just in a log, rolling a log over. You might find some amphibians that are active in the wintertime. Um, Most famously, mourning cloak butterflies. Uh, Overwinter as adults, which makes them unique in logs and in hollows and stuff like that. We'll get to tree hollows in a minute. Different arachnids and all sorts of different. This beetle down here was really fascinating because it's very flat as part of its ability to like kind of just slide underneath old bark. Um, so can you put, logs might be a design feature also, using them as edging or incorporating them towards the middle to give some height. Or I know a lot of people use logs to put like maybe planters on to maybe you want to control a cactus as a prickly pear as part of your design, right? But you don't want it taking over, or every time the pad falls off, you get another plant, right? So you can maybe put that in planter on top of a log, any sort of design ideas. But certainly these features uh, I've found have harbored a tremendous amount of biodiversity. Very cool stuff under the logs. Um, if you wanted to unlock expert mode on this, expert mode would not just be getting a log and putting it on the ground, but expert mode would be actually digging up some of the ground and putting the log kind of semi in the ground, because that then allows a pathway for creatures that go into the soil to get there a little bit easier. Or at least loosen up the soil underneath it if it's not already an established garden plot. Um, yeah, rocks too. Okay. I have some like flat shale, I guess. No, it's not shale. I don't even know what it is. Some flat rocks as like a step up border to a higher part of a garden. And in the dead of winter, I guess January 8th, 2023, I was very busy outside and probably in my bathrobe and slippers, flipping rocks over. And there's all sorts of life under there. Um, and this was my moment to also try to include the fact that wildlife is all the includes mollusks, includes these little tiny hexapods that are insects um, that feed a lot of larger wildlife. These guys are microscopic. They're very, very tiny. I'm using a macro lens for these guys. But yeah, just flipping logs. There's plenty of stuff that will scatter as soon as you lift that up. So I'm sorry, rocks. So incorporating rock features is good also. And not necessarily stepping stones where it's going to create a compact layer, layered rocks with with you know natural gaps in them. Now, I know the past couple slides with the creepy crawlies on it isn't necessarily everyone's thing. I included the newt there to like lighten it up a little bit. I know winter wildlife, everyone's jam is birds and mammals, but mostly birds. And I was just 100% birder before I came and everythinger. Um, and I get it, they are awesome. And in the wintertime, it's particularly magical, especially when we get like these winter visitors like crossbills. Um, it seems like it's going to be a very good winter for winter finches, which move down from the north every so often, depending on the cone crop up in the boreal forests in Canada. So it seems like we might be getting some cool species this year as they start to build up in southern New England. It's important so feeding birds naturally, restoring and rewilding, not just bird feeders, right? Because you only get a certain handful. If you only focus on bird feeders, you're missing out on a whole world of species. Aside from our predatory birds, most of them tend to have mixed diets. Very few are purely seed eaters, okay, granivores. Vast majority, and this is, I think, if everyone here's gateway into native plantings was like Doug Talmy, you know that they love insects, especially during breeding season. Okay, and other ones eat fruits, but lots of them cross over all the time. Okay, um, most of them I think we think of the sparrows and such as seed eaters in the wintertime, but that's mostly because that's what's most available. Given the option to feed on insects, they would. Okay. And a lot of what we're going to talk about here applies to mammals as well, as far as cone crops and things like that. So, thinking about birds and thinking about the ones that eat fruits like berries, um, thinking about, planning you would plan your garden earlier for the winter, right? When you're designing a garden, you want to have fruits and flowers year round, specifically which plants and trees though are going to provide those fruits and nuts or whatever their fruiting body is over the winter time, right? Blueberries, service berries, my favorite genus. They ripen way too early to be available over the wintertime. They're certainly important for other parts of the year, right? But if you're 100% in those in the genus Vaccinium and Amelanchier, then you're missing out on flowers and fruits later on in the season. Um, Acorns, hazelnuts, and some other things like that are important sources of food year round. Because they get cached by mammals and birds like blue jays. They'll gather them and they'll hide them. And I forget the number for blue jays, but it's really fascinating. They plant forests. They take those acorns and they bury them underground. They remember where some of them are, but not all of them. Um, the size and color of fruits is important if for feeding the birds. Birds have an eye for the color red. And if you are planting a cultivar, and I'm not going to cultivar shame, but if the goal is to feed the birds, planting a cultivar that's not the correct color that matches a wild type individual is probably not going to be as effective. Also, sometimes cultivars produce really large berries. In both the size and color situation, I'm thinking of winterberry in particular. Um, there are cultivars that produce huge berries. Also, some of the near native hawthorns that are planted, they huge fruits on them because they're meant to be more showy. Uh, a wild bird can't swallow that. Um, so getting as close to wild type as possible. If you do have late forming berry plants, are they dioecious? Which means like two houses. So a male plant has male flowers on one house, and a female plant has the female flowers on the other house, as opposed to monoecious plants that have male and female flowers. So for certain um, species, to make sure you have optimal berry production, you need to make sure you have available males, right? Useful males, question mark? Maybe, I don't know. Also, as many genetically unique individuals as possible and mass plantings. Um, I think you hear this a lot with blueberries in particular, if anyone grows that for food for yourself. The more different types of unique genetic individuals you have, the greater fruit production you have. So the same would be true for all the other ones. And mass plantings, having just one berry producing plant or just having one winter berry in, I don't know how mass plantings is going to be better. It's going to increase that diversity. It's going to increase the number of food crop that you can have. Okay. So here's one example of the different berry color. So this is the cultivar berry heaven gold, berry heavy gold winter berry. Um, so just as an example of like different colored fruit, birds have an eye for red. It's not just hummingbirds that have that. They all do, or most of them do, is my understanding. Um, okay. If you do have inkberries or it's pretty much that genus Ilex has like all these nice winter plants that we associate with the seasonality. Do you have the right cultivars? Do you have the males to pollinate those females? That way they have berries in the wintertime. This picture is uh, the male flowers of inkberry. I was lucky enough to get some wild type inkberries from ReWild a couple years ago now. And I was delighted to find that I had at least two of the six were males, which was great. And then I get the inkberries. Not that the inkberries are showy enough, the inkberry itself is showy enough for as a reason for humans to plant it, because they're kind of tucked along the stem there. But they're an important food source for birds. Um, and small mammals when they drop. There are some names for male cultivars of winterberry, inkberry, and American holly. But again, when possible, planting wild types. The more you plant, the more you roll the dice that you'll have at least one male or multiple females. And you could always move plants later on if you want winter berries. I don't know, framing steps to your house or something. 'Cause you think that would look awesome in wintertime, and one turns out to be a male, you could just move it later on. Um, so again, wild types when possible. Um, Cultivars exist for a reason. I get it. Um, uh, but if the goal is to have berries, you got to make sure uh, you got to figure out a way to where to put those males. Okay. Another one that is dioecious is junipers. But I think there's plenty of them around where and since they're wind pollinated, that you're like if you have a female, I think it's likely to get pollinated. Just on a side note, they do have apple cedar rust, um, and that could transfer to other species in the area. It's very the biology of that involves like um, two seasons of kind of swapping the spores back and forth. But just as a side note, so if you have your a juniper and it's starting to have these weird growths on it, that's what it is. You can decide if that's a problem or not. You could also just leave it. Does the rust itself go on to feed other creatures? I don't know. And I kind of skipped over on this presentation the role fungus plays on feeding organisms because I think we're still learning that like now. Um, so I guess a lot more to learn. You could be the one that learns and presents on that one. So just a list of some late berry producing plants. Maple leaf viburnum in particular. So again, this is where going on that walk might help. Maple leaf viburnum, red chokeberry, chokeberry. Some of the sumacs, they're dioecious, and Virginia creeper. Smilax also, that would be expert mode if you're going to have catbrier on your property. Not really a good landscaping plant, but if you have a large piece of property, it's a great native vine. Many different species of. Removing toxic berries is important, right? So here's one. I don't think too many people really have this around here, but or heavenly bamboo, right? The berries are known to be toxic to birds. Um, Another one is yews, right? A very common landscaping plant. Um, the jury seems to be out just on how toxic they are to wild birds. Um, but the answer is that they're not. The answer is that they're somewhere between slightly toxic and very toxic. So I went through a number of different sites. I cited Cornell on this one because I felt like that was the most reputable source. There is a native taxus species, but apparently the deer are well adapted to that one, and it gets wiped out pretty quickly, is my understanding. So some other wildlife stuff. Leaving grasses. Um, we talked about the leaves earlier, but leaving stands of grasses and sedges. There's no need to like chop these down. I have this beautiful, uh, um, what's the English name? Whatever. This beautiful grass at the school here. Um, and this is one of my favorite sedges I have here, Carex. Oh my God, my brain is skipping right now. On my property. The seeds or whatever the fruiting body is of those grasses are important food source, and they can act as cover for birds and for mammals and insects. And I think what's great to think about is that the winter is temporary, right? Um, Leaving this stuff, you could think about how these strands here, these browned out parts of the sedge, would be great nesting material for birds when they return in the spring, or for the ones that are still here. Okay. What about those predators that aren't eating the fruits or not eating the seeds? They're not foraging for those little insects underneath logs and in the leaves or around the rocks. Um, you know, having large roosting locations, uh, leaving mature trees when you can, when they're not a hazard to property, leaving snags for those birds to perch on, and leaving hollows is important for all sorts of creatures, including mammals. I was lucky enough to see a flying squirrel in the middle of the day poking its head out of this hollow. Um, and again, you imagine there's probably a morning cloak butterfly that's hibernating in that hollow right now. Um, and utilizing some evergreen species um, to for those creatures to hide out in. And then again, using owl boxes and bat boxes appropriately, placing them the right way. Again, this is where rewilding, restoring, and not just helping. Letting a owl box go derelict and it being taken over by other creatures might not be the solution either. So making sure it's sited properly and it's cleaned out every so often, right? Again, those require active management. Okay. I know it's a big question, so I did throw this slide in here. People always ask, like, what are some evergreen species? There's a bunch. These are just some of them, like magnolia trees I could have put on here, but I don't know if that's evergreen in the sense everyone thinks of. I think when most people ask about evergreens, they're talking about dense evergreen foliage, which again is going to provide food and cover for birds, for mammals. And any other creatures that are waking up, insects and stuff. So here's just a quick list. As a bonus here, I put this picture of bearberry, right, as a ground cover. I don't think I listed it here. And I had to include this picture because in the center here is a very rare orchid. If you know, you know. Um, but this is on Long Island. So bearberry is a good nursery site for some other special plants. Um, Right. And just some more pictures of coral. I included a coral honeysuckle here. Sempervirens means sometimes green, and it stays pretty well green for me over the winter time. And a couple of years ago, I was getting flowers in January. I have no idea what the evolutionary advantage of that is, but it is just such a cool plant. And if you don't have one, that's like a must have. Like just get an arbor and get this plant and just put it someplace. Just a great to use a word that Kim from KMS would use all the time. It's just a fantastic plant. She likes the word fantastic. It is a fantastic plant. Very dense cover. I every time I come home, this particular one, I've a couple on my property. This particular one is along my driveway, and every time I could walk over, the birds scatter out of it. They like that one a lot. Lots of nice little perching locations for them on those woody stems, or those the woody parts of the vine. I've yet to see a clearwing caterpillar on it. There's a snowberry clearwing moth caterpillar. I've yet to have one on it. Okay. And then some more obvious things, right? Seed heads, duh. Leaving those around is great food for birds as they fall. Good food for mammals. The insects are can be still living in there, even maybe some smaller ones. This is nine bark, um, Physocarpus. It blooms pretty early. The seed heads are gorgeous, and there's still seed in it now. So talking about like those late berry producing, late fruiting plants. This one is kind of early, but they still persist pretty well into the season. This is a great plant all around. Um, but I think the seed heads are kind of self-explanatory here. Okay. Pithy stems are important overwintering sites for lots of insects. So you might see birds looking at the stems of plants. I've seen woodpeckers holding onto stems and kind of hammering at them. There's insects in there. I know you can't really tell, but in this is a purple flowering raspberry. In here, I noticed some movement one day, and it was this bee that was in there. This beautiful blue metallic, it's Ceratina genus bee was using the stem, getting ready, making cells and laying eggs, getting ready for the winter time. Very, very cool. And then with that was at my house. Then with students at school, we were cracking open stems to see if we could find something. We cracked this one open. I could see that there was these little dots in here, which is the frass or the poop of the insect, and then out popped this guy, and it's one of the only observations of this species on Long Island on iNaturalist. So we got to like kind of all experience that together as a class, which was pretty cool. Um, Elderberry is a great one for pithy stems. I mean, that's explicitly mentioned in one of Talmy's books, and that was like the first plant I went out and grabbed for my yard. So if you don't have an elderberry, great plant for pithy stems. And down here is what we mean by pithy. It has kind of this soft inner material that bees and other adapted insects can chew out to make a space to either overwinter themselves as adults or to pupate in or leave eggs in. But there's any number of species that's suitable habitat for. A lot of common ones that I think a lot of people would have in their yards already. Um, and then the reptiles and amphibians, they they're in a state of brumation, deep underground for the most part. But I added some pictures here. This guy was underneath a log. Okay, I added this one because this was a cool one. Um, we have a very special population of this blue-spotted salamander on Long Island. But now they're deep underground. The turtles are deep underground. I included this picture of a garter snake because it came out from a root hollow. We saw it come out. It did like this stretch. This was like early March, I believe. So if you're going to do that expert mode with the logs and half bury it, it gives things a pathway in. And I included the picture of the Fowler's toad to show like kind of the sandy soil substrate. Again, what's around your house? Are you emulating? Are you just making everything compost and garden soil when it's supposed to be sandy? Um, so I think planting the right plants, avoiding pesticides, and just supporting everything else would be good start to when thinking about these larger creatures, these more sensitive creatures like salamanders, toads, frogs, and turtles, and snakes. And I didn't mention water features also, but that's certainly a piece of the puzzle here too. Okay. Getting crafty with it. Okay. You can make these bug snugs. Okay. So taking some sticks, making a teepee, and then doing alternating layers of brush. And that you could fit. So thinking about where to put the leaves, where to put other debris. The bug snugs, this is only maybe 2.5 feet high, and it holds a crazy amount of brush. You'd be surprised when you start stacking it up. So that might be a nice solution and a more crafty way to think about your space and what to do with those leaves as you want to try to move towards that 100% keeping it on your property. And then, I said I'd mention the bird feeders, right? Tried to get some high quality seed here. It's probably Costco. The peanut butter on down pine cones and then stringing them up for the birds. Um, okay. And then when you have questions, I know we're getting towards the end here. If you have questions about what you're looking at, your own phone, if you take a picture of something, iPhones, you might notice has this down towards the middle bottom here, it's going to have this symbol. And if you swipe up on that, it'll give you its best guess. For adults that are more tech savvy, there's iNaturalist. For children, Seek, which is by iNaturalist, is compliant with educational and child privacy laws, which is a great way to get young people involved with nature. And then there's just like getting a field guide. I learned birds from a book. I learned wildflowers from Newcomb's Flower Guide, which is like from the 70s. It's out of date, but it's still a great starting spot. So, don't be afraid to, not everything has to be on the computer. Get a book and it's, wintertime, snuggle up with a field guide and start looking through it if you're interested in learning more about birds, plants, Insects, the field guide's going to be pretty thick, um, but they're out there. I think I'm going to skip over how iNaturalist works here. And to end with, don't forget winter ends, right? This is not a permanent situation that you're planning for, right? It's not just about winter. It's also about when is winter going to end, right? Uh, in early mid-March, I have bees. This is at my property because prairie willow is blooming already. Amelanchiers are blooming by April, right? Your spring ephemerals, your violets. Um, Make sure you have those too, right? So like the part of the wonder and beauty of winter is the anticipation of spring, right? So enjoy your landscape in the wintertime and get outside. Um, Contribute to citizen science when you can through iNaturalist, eBird. Join a Christmas bird count in your area. I run the Smithtown. I'm the compiler for the Smithtown Christmas bird count. If anyone's interested, but get outside, emulate nature. Restore, rewild it. I think that's it. I kind of ran through the end there. I don't know if I hope someone learned something, but that's all I got.
I definitely learned a lot. It was a great ecology course, honestly, with how everything was connected. So thank you very much for speaking, and thank you to everybody who um, visited our talk. I kind of want to open up, if you're willing, David, to more
Yeah,
discussion, and maybe questions. Uh, so if um, if you could stop sharing your screen, maybe we could have people raise their hands or just unmute themselves and maybe ask some questions.
sure. Well, I see in the chat, how do you know how to ID maple leaf viburnum? Viburnums are opposite leaved, right? Madcap horse, maples, ashes, dogwoods, Caprifoliaceae, and horse chestnut. Viburnums used to be in Caprifoliaceae. I think they're a different thing now. Um, so opposite leaved, low growing, shady areas, and the leaves look like maples. There's no shrub maple around here that I'm aware of. How do you tell if a red cedar is male or female? So you'll see, so with all of these plants, you don't know until they're in flower of some sort.
Okay, that's me.
Cedar, yeah,
Hi, it's my
cedars.
question. What do you know when they flower? So I can
Well,
make a
so
note to look.
cedars are gymnosperms, so they have these macrostrobili or microstrobili. You'd have to look closely at those like pre-clone. I can't think of off the top of my head like when they would be showing those features. That would be something that you want to just
Check every
research and
week.
then
Yeah, maybe check
and
it every week. Because I
what's
have
that?
red cedars just popping up in my yard, and
Yeah,
they're not always in a good place. And if I try to move them, they always die. So I have one in
yeah,
particular on my front lawn that it's getting big and round because I'm shaping it because I can't put a 50-foot tree there. My yard's way too small.
yeah,
But I have no idea if it's a female or a male. I'm hoping that it's a female because I'd like
yeah.
to.
Just like humans, it takes plants a number of years to reach sexual maturity
Mhm.
also. So you might not know for a couple of years, and then you won't know till you investigate the flowering body or
So
the
start looking
reproduction.
in the spring.
Yeah, I can't think of when it is for cedars, but you could and add that to your walks. Find a
Yeah,
cedar
I have a
and
list of things I do every day, every week
and
and
check
every
it out.
day in my
Yeah.
yard. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
you're
for the
welcome.
talk. It was great.
You're welcome. Um, Pithy plants, zinnia, purple coneflower, goldenrod, others. Um, I had that list there. Yeah, the purple coneflower has a hollow stem. Zinnia, I'm not familiar with because it's not native. Goldenrods, yes and no. I think I did not include stuff about galls. I just ran out of time, and I actually don't really have pictures of them. Um, but I think pretty much everything we know we're only just learning that like there's a predatory wasp for every species of plant. And we're still like learning that. And I'm sure there is a creature that uses the stem of any plant. There was just some more well-known ones for, say, native bees, like the ones I listed, elderberry and roses and stuff. Um, but I'm sure most plants, the stems are utilized. They're not utilized frequently. You're not going to like go out in the wintertime and find like oodles of holes full of bee nests. But they're there. Um, but yeah, that would be my answer to that. Does that answer that, Dave? David?
Yeah, he just nodded his head.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I had a problem with not relocating leaves that the wind blew and it almost lost my goal. I was definitely say
I think Francesca had a question further down talking about if you're leaving spent flowers, then you don't have hollow stems, unless you chop off the seed heads.
I've not noticed that. I think if you are leaving spent flowers, then you don't have hollow stems.
I, I would believe the insects eat their or bore their way into the stem.
Yeah, they're not coming in from the top. They're coming in from the side. So like that one where I showed that the frass was inside, we knew to break that stem because we actually saw a hole on the outside. I just didn't take a picture of it. Um, yeah, so they're making their way in. Um, I'm sure there's different weevils and stuff also that bite through the outer woody layer to get to that interior meatier section of a stem. Again, the diversity there is so great. There's probably no one size fits all answer.
With regard to the earlier thing, Emma, the leaves, one of the issues that I had, I was saying, was slugs. I didn't realize I left so much that slugs ended up, creating families. And so they ate my cardinal flowers. And I didn't realize, like, there's a tension between, like you said, leaving a big stack versus a small stack and not leaving them at the base of the plant. And really,
Yeah.
you do have to go, you can't just kind of, oh, the leaves fell and leave them. You have to go out and kind of manage it.
Yeah.
didn't
So
realize.
with cardinal flower, right, in nature, and this is a pretty rare plant on Long Island for whatever reason, but where it does occur naturally, it's not going to have leaves around it because it's on the border of aquatic systems along riverways and stuff. So that's out of sync with how it performs in nature. Also, you should manage slugs. For the most part, they're invasive. If they have a mantle, which is like that thick rubbery part that only covers half their body, that's a non-native one. Our native slugs have a mantle that cover their whole body from head to tail. Um, so like the leopard slug that I think most people are familiar, that's not here. And also the non-native ones are the only ones that eat our vegetables and our vegetable gardens. The native slugs are not a problem at all. I Part of the master naturalist training, we did a workshop with this scientist at Cornell. Who does stuff with slugs and mollusks. She just loves snails, and it was so fascinating the world that exists there. And she was teaching us about that. It was very cool.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. Hi, sorry.
Hi.
My name's Oksana. I appreciate the talk, really a lot of good information. I don't know, maybe it's too customized. So is there any group or any community that I can ask to help me design the landscape? We had the big property developed right behind my property, and the development wiped out a really large strip of woods. And now not only we lost the privacy, but all the creatures that we had residing in that forest are homeless. And I had a terrible for me, but wonderful for them, summer in the garden. They ate all my produce because they all came here for a buffet
Yeah.
which was okay, but we were trying to compensate, but what do I plant?
Yeah, so I would think about, what used to be there. I'm gonna plug ReWild, right? They have a garden design course
Okay,
you could
perfect,
take.
thank you.
But if you have enough land, replanting those trees, right? The land is, in your case, probably yearning to be a forest again.
Yes, it's half an acre, but I would like to at least build the
Yeah,
perimeter up a little bit just to make
yeah,
sure that we can live somewhere again because we had everything, bats and bunnies, and now they're all gone, and
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking.
So Rewild does have a homeowner's garden design workshop. So if you're interested in designing your own space, we
Hmm.
we provide sort of like the expertise for that. It's not currently available. It might be available either later in the winter or early next year.
Okay.
But that will be posted on all of our social media, all of our like our websites and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
All right.
We also have native plant sales. So if you're looking for certain species, we might have them available. We can also direct you to different native plant nurseries. So like I know like I think Dropseed Native Landscaping does like consulting and also they sell plenty of plants. Same thing with Long Island Native Plant Initiatives. You can get individual plants there. And usually like everybody there's super helpful and like willing
yeah.
to like talk about what plants might be best for your location.
All right, thank you. I'm obviously interested in something quickly growing and, budget friendly, but I understand it's
Remember,
difficult.
acorns are free, right? You can, the lineage of the
Yeah.
tree that is now gone still exists in the soil someplace,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And if the every forest started with an acorn type mentality. Um, so if you have the space for some oaks, um, nothing's more budget friendly than an acorn on the ground. And I know you said quick growing, but the power of an oak is unmatched, even a small one, right? So you think, put in order of priority, like what you want to accomplish, if it's the privacy first or the habitat first or whatever, and then take it from there, I would say.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Dee also mentioned KMS Native Plants, which I forgot is another
Amen.
great resource.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Lake Grove, she's such a great resource driving out to her on Long Island. I don't know where you are, but I went
In
there and
Century,
she's
so I'm
just,
very close, yes.
Oh, okay.
she's a treasure trove of
Yeah.
information and plants, and she's just, I don't think she does garden design anymore, but you can say what you want, and she helped me figure out, I haven't done it yet, but what to do for a
Or if
hedge.
you're just
Sort of,
you're just having a bad day and you need a burst of positivity, you go and you talk to
yes,
her. Yeah.
Can I just
yes,
add something? If you
yes.
have clear land, I got rid of a lot of ivy in my yard, and since I have all kinds of native plants have been popping up. So if you have things popping up in your yard, I would identify them before you pull them out as weeds. Because I've gotten so many great plants and some of them were trees. So like I have what do I have? I have all kinds of things. I have all kinds of wood asters. I have the blue and the white wood aster.
Yes, I've been rehoming
Yeah.
them, and I do
Yeah, so just
use the
keep an eye and
suckers.
identify
So,
something. What I usually do is I let it bloom once before I pull it out. And then once I know what it looks like, then I know whether to weed or not. I have a
mhm.
crabapple tree that's growing. I have a black cherry tree, none of which I planted. They just
Oh,
came up in my
nice.
yard. So
Okay.
just keep an eye out when things pop up. You might get lucky and you might get some really nice things.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other winter wildlife questions?
I just want to say that I did see a cardinal today. I always feel like the birds are gonna just go away, right? But now that I have native gardens, I see them all the time. They're still out there. There's plenty of squirrels too, but I definitely keep seeing. And it was in a plant, and I'm like, what are you doing? It's
Yeah.
probably bugs or whatever.
Yeah, I actually stopped putting out I'll put out a feeder during like the Christmas bird count, but I used to put a feeder out all the time, and I don't anymore.
Right.
At all.
We have lots of aster seeds, and because I have all the wood aster that came up everywhere, and the birds
Mhm.
love that. We've got tons of birds in the asters.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
If not, then we can pause or we can end the recording here. But again, thank you guys so much, and thank you so much, David. That was very informative.
Thank
Um,
you.
I
Thank
learned a
you.
lot, so that was great. Yeah. Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys.